Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, 3 bodies are found in Khartoum's twin city of Omdurman, a day after fatal clashes between security forces and Sudanese protesters calling for the military council to hand over to civilian rule. Also, Ethiopia's leader warns that would-be plotters will be treated harshly and that his government will not go down without a fight. Abiy Ahmed's statement comes after last month's fatal coup attempt in Amhara. And the elephant stomped to victory. Ivory Coast is through to the last 16 after routing Namibia 4-1 in their Africa Cup of Nations match in Cairo. We hear from our correspondent in Ivory Coast. But first, Sudanese activists say that at least 11 people have been killed in clashes with security forces over the weekend. 3 bodies were found next to a school in the city of Omdurman on Monday. On Sunday, thousands of people took part in the biggest rallies against ruling generals since a fatal crackdown on protesters in early June. Talks between the military council and protest leaders have since stalled. Demonstrators have been calling for generals to hand over to civilian rule in the wake of the ousting of longtime leader Omar al-Bashir back in April. For more, we speak to our regional correspondent, Jason Potemkin. Jason, could the violent response to Sunday's protests have been predicted? It's not the first time security forces have come down so hard on rallies.
Absolutely. This definitely could have been predicted. The security forces in Sudan, the government forces in Sudan, have been very brutal for many decades. This is really the thing they do best, so to speak, is using aggression and using force. And they even said, members of the ruling military council even said before the protest started yesterday, they said that anything that happened would be the fault of the protesters. So that's basically telegraphing that they would use force to break this up. That said, there was much less force used in Khartoum. Even though numerous people died, there was less force used in Khartoum than outside Khartoum. In other cities around the country where there were protests, there seemed to have been more violence used than in Khartoum.
Despite that violence and despite those deaths, we did see more protests on Monday. Do you think that this latest crackdown will in any way dampen protesters' resolve?
No, I don't think so. The violence used against them in the last day or two since the march on the 30th has been much smaller compared to the massive crackdown that took place on June 3rd. When over 100 people were killed in just one day. So really, we're looking at in fact, a smaller level of violence than previously, yet an even bigger level of protests. So it seems that the protesters have really lost their fear of the security services and are willing to continue to protest no matter what. I spoke to one protester today, and he said that when those 3 bodies were found in Omdurman, that actually sparked more people to go out into the streets and more people to protest. So I don't think this violence is going to stop the people's demand for democracy and freedom.
Thanks very much, Jason Potemkin, there for us. Well, Ethiopia's prime minister has warned dissenters that he will come down hard on any threat to the government's sovereignty. Abiy Ahmed accused organisers of a failed coup in which several officials were assassinated last month of trying to destabilise the country. Abiy's critics say that he has used the incident as an excuse to stifle opposition voices. Nicolas Chemin tells us more.
Immediately after the attacks in Ethiopia, the Prime Minister had appeared on state television wearing military fatigues. On Monday, he addressed lawmakers for the first time since the murder of the head of the army and several regional officers. He said the attacks had been an attempted coup but had not been ethnically motivated.
With irrational minds, it is impossible to think about launching a coup d'etat at the federal level. But if you are irrational, that's a different story. Thinking about launching a coup d'etat at the federal level in Ethiopia today is insanity. It's impossible. You could create a tragedy. Hundreds of thousands could die in one day, but you cannot form a government.
Some analysts believe coup is a misleading word because there were no major troop movements. The airport and state television were not seized. On the 22nd of June, a militia commanded by General Asamnu attacked government buildings in the state of Amhara. The governor and 2 other officials were killed. Then in the capital, Addis Ababa, the head of the army was assassinated by his bodyguard. Asamnu, who was later shot dead, believed the government was not doing enough for the Amhara people. More than 250 people have been detained. Critics say Abiy Ahmed is using the event to arrest opposition figures. He came to power last year and has carried out sweeping reforms. There is now more freedom of speech in Ethiopia, but this has also given rise to an increase in ethnic tensions and hate speech across the country.
Look now at some news in brief. Malian authorities say that at least 23 people have been killed in attacks on villages on Sunday. Armed men reportedly attacked communities in Bidi, Sankura and Saran. There has been a wave of similar attacks in the centre of the country this year. Extremist cells and ethnic tensions between Dogon and Fulani groups has fed into ongoing unrest in the region. Tunisia's president was released from hospital on Monday. Beji Caid Essebsi was admitted last Thursday, sparking concern that the 92-year-old's absence from the job could lead to instability. His office had said that he was suffering from a serious illness, but is now back to normal health. South Sudan's President Salva Kiir met with his Kenyan counterpart in Nairobi on Monday. Uhuru Kenyatta and Kiir say that they're keen on boosting trade between their two countries. South Sudan's currently struggling to implement a deal to end over 5 years of brutal civil war. Nairobi is one of the guarantors of that fragile peace process. Zimbabwe's finance ministry said that citizens will be able to withdraw up to $1,000 a day from some accounts. The news comes as a relief to those who fear that the central bank might raid foreign currency accounts as the country prepares to switch from the use of dollars to its own currency. A foreign currency shortage has contributed to the country's economic crisis. Now, Morocco's topped Group D after a 1-0 win over South Africa. Meanwhile, Ivorian football fans are ecstatic after their team clinched a place in the last 16 at the Africa Cup of Nations with a solid 4-1 win over Namibia. The game was in Cairo, but a lot of the passion was in Abidjan, and that's where our Frank Hersey was as he followed the match.
The Namibians may be, but they couldn't hold back Ivory Coast elephants. Now things got off to a tense start both on the pitch and here in Abidjan, where ministers came to watch, sitting quietly and looking serious with the brass band hiding away out of sight. But then, in the 39th minute, the scoring began. The score at halftime was still 1-0. And then coming back for the second half, things were still a little tense because the last time these two teams met was in 2018 and Namibia scored a surprise win. But then the scoring continued. Ivory Coast scored a second, and then Namibia's next goal was politely acknowledged, and then Ivory Coast tore ahead with a third and a fourth goal.
So you know, with the elephants from Côte d'Ivoire, nothing is ever easy. It's always like that. Here we call it a team of gourmands. It means a team which is frightening. But one thing's for sure, when we least expect it, they always do well. They start slowly like a diesel engine, but at the end you will be surprised, and the Ivorians will go very far. I see them in the final.
So it's Ivory Coast going through to the round of 16 starting on Friday. And with a little sense of national unity, which the country could well do with in this time of otherwise tense times.
Frank Hersey there in the thick of it for us. Well, she's declared herself the defender of the chubby. Nigerian singer Teniola Abata is a breakout star who's come a long way in a short time. Tenny the entertainer also stands out as she pushes cultural conventions with her feminist voice. Her music videos have been viewed around 10 million times on YouTube, and she says that she's setting her goals on going global. Have a look.
Meet Teniola Abata, one of the biggest young names in Nigeria's burgeoning music scene. With her gold chains and bold dress sense, 26-year-old Teniola has never been scared to stand out, and she views her individualistic mentality as a key part of her success.
If you don't have the mentality of success, they will kid you and tell you, no, this is how you should be. But I don't want to be like that. I want to be me.
It's this authenticity, along with the striking stage presence, that is making her a fan favourite at music festivals like Giddy Fest, a major event in the Lagos youth culture calendar.
She came out on stage, right? And that excitement of like the music they hear on the radio, and it's just as good, if not better live, that's what she is.
Her success in the music industry has also propelled her into becoming something of a feminist icon. With her uncompromising tomboyish style, she hopes to pave the way for other female artists, no matter how they wish to express themselves.
I see a lot of labels signing female artists nowadays, and they'll tell me, since it was possible with you, then it can be possible with them too.
With over 1 million followers on Instagram and her YouTube videos racking up tens of millions of views, Tenny the Entertainer has truly asserted her presence on the African scene. Her next goal is the international market, with her sights set on one day filling London's Wembley Stadium.
Thank you very much. I love you guys. Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. For now, thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.